This is CityCast Twin Cities. I'm Sean McPherson, and here's what the cities are talking about. Hans, I have to level with you. I see all my neighbors on vacations or carrying golf bags around all the time. Do you also feel like you are the only person putting in any work in the Twin Cities right now?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my neighbors the other day were like, they were like, oh, come over for cocktails at like 2 p.m. Like, I'm sending an email to everybody to come over for cocktails. And I was like, I mean, that sounds awesome. But also, I got a wall-to-wall meeting schedule. So no, right. But also good for you. Good for you.
I'm worried we both might live near people who can use summer as a verb. Like, I summer here, I summer there. And I'm just like, that ain't me. Good luck on your golf game. But like, I got to still put these out.
And applauding just any workplace or anybody who can manage to get themselves into Friday off, 3-day weekend, summer schedule. Like, just do it for the rest of us. This is great.
Yeah. Congratulations, and I hate you. That is Hans Buetow, podcast producer extraordinaire. He's putting in the work, and today we got a lot of work to do. We have a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about the state of Minnesota and Ramsey County suing 2 local gangs in anticipation of possible violence around this year's state fair. There are also a lot of questions swirling around the upcoming Minneapolis city budget, and we're going to talk with someone from the Board of Estimate and Taxation about just that. And it is a Friday in August. We don't have Friday off, but we do want to celebrate some Twin Cities wins. We've got some awesome stuff lined up, and we have a special edition of Hot Dish Hush. Ooh, I like that addition there, Hans.
I'm like a hype man.
For this particular one, executive producer Anna and myself will compete in a game to get Hans to mention some Minnesota summer traditions. Now, that whole Hot Dish Hush situation is only available to our members. If you are a member, you'll get to hear this amazing segment, in addition to getting ad-free episodes and getting an email from me every week and invites to members-only events. Also, our members get a chance to use our formidable megaphone to shout out a favorite neighborhood spot. A couple weeks ago, our neighbor Mitchell shouted out Dream State Cafe in Uptown. And Mitchell, we took your advice. We went to Dream State for a work meeting. I had a squash sandwich that changed my life, namely because I think squash is usually trash. And this was a very delicious sandwich. So if you want a neighbor, well, listen, it's not a hot take.
Squash is trash is a hot take. Okay. Whoa, listen. I don't know that we can have the rest of the episode. This is, I need to lay down for a minute. This is too much.
If you want to fight about squash, it's only $10 a month. So just do it. Sign up now.
That's right.
Membership.
Come after me. Pay $10 to come after me.
And there's a couple people who just joined the squash conversation. Those are our newest neighbors, Max G, Sarah K, and Stephanie O. Join them, argue about squash, as well as enjoying extra segments and ad-free episodes. Do it all by going to membership.citycast.fm/Twin Cities. Hans, a couple headlines came across my eyes this week that really surprised me, mainly because I didn't know this was something that was possible. And these headlines all related to the state of Minnesota and Ramsey County suing 2 local gangs to prevent violence in and around this year's state fair. Hans, did you know it was like legally possible to sue a gang?
No, because don't you need like an affiliation? You need something like legally unifying, which I feel like is kind of the opposite of what a gang is. And so exactly. No, that feels like that's hard to wrap the head around.
We're in the same boat, but now we have some background about how this law came about and how it is possible. And it's relying on a 2007 law that's commonly known as the Minnesota Civil Gang Nuisance Law. And what this law does is give judges the power to issue injunctions that declare a gang a public nuisance and then restrict where members can go and what they can do, which is, okay, cool, but who are the members? We'll get to that in a minute. Mm-hmm. And these laws have been used before. The city of St. Paul filed for similar injunctions in 2009 and 2015 to ban alleged gang members from taking part in gang activities at Cinco de Mayo festivities.
Can I ask your brilliant legal mind a question here, Sean? What's an injunction?
An injunction is an official court order that does tell a person, business, or group to stop doing a specific action or to perform a required act. So I've often seen this in sort of time-sensitive situations where they go, we can't get to the bottom of this, but the court has ordered an injunction for you to stop doing said activity or for you to start doing this. So it's an actual resolution, but it's going, right now the court is saying, you got to stop doing this. That's where we're at with an injunction.
So this injunction is directed at state fair specific, right, by Ramsey County and the state together. And it's directed at it's anti-gang injunctions. So like, why now? Why this thing from those two entities?
Sure. There's two feuding gangs that we've made the decision to not name because we don't need to add more publicity to their names. It is easy to obtain their names by checking out the Sahan Journal, the Pioneer Press. Those articles are linked in our show notes. You can find them there. But one of these gangs posted a flyer on social media challenging the other gang to a fight. And the flyer referred to the state fair as the biggest battle of the summer. So it is not manufactured or fabricated to think that the state fair might be a locus of violence between these two gangs. I do want to pause and say my biggest concern was going, are you just going to say folks who look like the people who are in these gangs are now in the gang?
That's the question. Yes.
Wildly worrisome to me, especially I've read a ton about Crash, Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums, which was a program in Los Angeles, which was basically just like, let's treat young black people like they're in a gang until they substantiate that they aren't.
Right.
And I am still very nervous about similar policies happening here. In this case, it is people who are identified in other court cases about these gangs. So in this particular injunction, it is not a rounding up of just everybody.
And so it's a limited group of people who's actually named in the injunction. How many people were we talking?
10 people, which is, doesn't really substantiate a huge brawl, but you imagine that those 10 people might be coming with other guests and things like that. But it's just 10 individuals that are mentioned or in this injunction.
So you mentioned brawls, and this does remind me that in 2025, there was shots fired at the state fair, right, related to gang activity. And then in 2024, there was a big fight amongst, dozens of people, I think. And so is this in response directly to that?
Yes, I think it is. In the articles I've read, it's saying that historically, and we're not going back, to hundreds of years ago, but we're saying historically, the state fair has been a site for some amount of violence between gangs. And also, like, Hans, I just want our lived experience, which does not relate a lot to what's going on here. But like, I remember when I would get back to Central, you and I went to high school together, people would be like, did you hear what happened at the state fair? Who got in a fight with each other?
Yep.
This is a moment when sort of things happen. That's high school fisticuffs. This is something obviously much more worrisome.
Yeah.
Right. This is escalated. But there is a sense that violence does tend to, get to places where there are large groups of people and maybe people who normally don't mix if they're just staying in their respective neighborhoods.
Yeah. And the fact that these folks are advertising on social media, we're going to have some sort of altercation. This is why suddenly the state and Ramsey County feels the need for this injunction. So what does this injunction allow them to do? What are they going to do to prevent any sort of further altercations from happening? They've named 10 people, but like, what do they do to those 10 people? And how is this supposed to work?
The injunction, if granted, would legally prevent known gang members who are listed in the court documents from associating with each other at or near the fair.
Right.
Now, on top of that, this is beyond the injunction. Ramsey County Sheriff Bob Fletcher says his department will also be monitoring other kids that they know to be affiliated but are not listed in the court document, and that they'll be making more arrests than usual this year. Hans, this is the most worrisome statement in my world, because I'm worried that this is where it becomes a dragnet. This is where it just becomes hard to be a 17-year-old Somali kid who wants to go to the fair.
Yeah. So you brought up that this is Somali kids. These two gangs are Somali affiliated. They are listed as quote unquote Somali gangs. And our Somali community has been through an enormous amount in the past 30 years and in the past year specifically. I mean, just think about all the things that have been said nationally by the most powerful people in the country about this specific group. And it feels like this is a real problem with, I'm sure that community doesn't want violence, doesn't want kids with guns or fists or anything going after each other. It's a real problem, but it also is not the Somali community. It is these kids who are doing this thing. And it feels like those things could very easily get mixed in together, and there could be suspicions of Somali folks at the fair. There could be just more reputational damage to the wider community. So do you have any sense of how the Somali community is responding to this idea of the injunction?
Not surprisingly, not as a monolith, right? Not in lockstep with each other, because I think a lot of community members have different feelings. And there is, at least in my personal opinion, absolutely legitimate concern about the entire Somali community getting painted with this broad brush based on a handful of bad actors. And I want to point out that some of the journalism that's been done covers a lot of this. So there's a Sahan Journal article that I really recommend, written by Mohammed Ibrahim. It talks about the lawsuit against the gang and cites multiple people expressing support for an injunction, as Somali kids' involvement in gangs is a real problem. I don't think anybody is saying it's not a real problem. And I think there is a lot of nervousness from myself and from others about Sheriff Fletcher using this injunction that might be rightful as a carte blanche to turn the state fair into a militarized zone that will really put the focus of that militarized force on Somali youth alone. That's not what the injunction permits, but I'm nervous that in the transfer from point A to point, September 2nd at the fair, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. And I wonder if there's an opportunity here for the Ramsey County Police and the State Fair Police, which is its own separate police force, to be able to build some trust within communities, to be able to be really transparent about their intentions, to be really transparent about the risks, and to be really transparent about the efforts that they make during the course of the 12 days of the fair, and make this a really positive experience for folks coming in, for the communities they serve, and for the communities that they're paying attention to. They've referred to this as a tool in their toolbox. So I think we need to be really, really, really cognizant of how they wield this tool.
I'd like to be baldly honest. We would really like to hear from you, particularly because a lot of the impacts, all of the serious impacts from this injunction are not going to touch the Hans Butos and Sean McPhersons
Not
of
at
the
all.
world. And we need the feedback from people who feel it in a different way and experience it in a different way to tell this story. This is the group we had to have the conversation today. I'm thankful we covered it, but we'd love to have your feedback in the mix. Send us a text or leave us a voicemail. The number is 612-217-0637. We have more news to discuss, but before we do that, we'll take a quick break. On Wednesday morning, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey presented his plan for the 2027 city budget, and he had a really tall task: closing a $32 million budget gap. We do not have an office of printing money in Minneapolis, so we have to make some painful decisions about how that budget gap is going to get closed. And to help us break down the mayor's plan, we're joined by Eric Harris Bernstein, EHB, who is the vice president of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Welcome to the show, Eric. Glad to have you.
Hi, thanks for having me. I think you might have just cracked it. We need an office of printing money.
Why isn't that in the budget?
OPM.
Eric, can you clarify for us what the Board of Estimate and Taxation, what is the role that you all have in this budget that Mayor Frey is proposing?
Yeah, so our role is somewhat limited. Our power is to set the amount that the city's general fund levy and its other property tax levies can increase.
Okay.
So we say we need a certain amount of money to fund general operations or to fund the park board. Those are kind of the two big ones. And so, we ask for an amount of money from all city property tax payers, and it's the board's job to vote for what that levy can be in a given year. So last year, I don't know it off the top of my head. It's a couple $100 million, like 5 to 7. And so we basically can say how much it can increase. And if we don't agree, then it defaults to what it was in the previous year.
That's scary and a big responsibility. Are you and the rest of this board treated with respect? Are you guys treated like sort of as a nuisance by the other stakeholders? Are they like, okay? Or are they sort of like, oh my God, we still have to go meet with the BET folks?
I command an enormous amount of respect. Well, John Edwards at the Wedge Live does refer to me as the city's lowest ranking and least respected public official.
Okay.
So from that measure, yeah, that's tough. But no, the colleagues on the board, Elliot Payne, Aisha Chugtai, the mayor, and Tom Olson from the park board, I find great to work with, including the mayor. He and I have talked on the phone several times when, things have come up on his end or when I've had questions about his plans or whatever. And, they obviously don't, I'm not a city council member and certainly, don't have that level of power and influence over the wide range of things. But I think people are very genial and open to working together to get to a budget that we're all proud of.
Well, then let's hold this very unpowerful person's feet to the fire.
Yeah.
Why do we have a $32 million gap to fill out? Like, why is this happening?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different reasons. So obviously the elephant in the room is police spending. And the fact that for the last several years, we've had, around $20 million of police overtime costs that were not accounted for in the budget. And so that represents a substantial portion of the issue there. And police in general, they're a big portion of the budget, which is true in most cities. So that is one large factor. But I would say there's other things that are happening across the board, health insurance costs, cost of living raises for the city staff. And then another big one that I think is less about how much we're spending and more just about how the city's economy and the city's sort of, business climate or like whatever is evolving, is that we're also just bringing in less non-property tax revenue than we used to relative to the price level. In other words, our non-property tax revenues are not keeping up with prices and the growth of the economy overall. I think you could argue there's lots of places where we should, get spending in line or get better value for our dollars, but it's not like spending has exploded. It's more that the revenues have stagnated in these other areas. Like there's a chart that was presented to the board by the city finance department when they did what they call their current service level presentation. Basically it showed, that like property taxes have grown pretty, consistently, you could say even significantly, but like our non-levy revenues are not much higher than they were like in 2024, for example, and they're not projected to grow much more. So that's things like the sales taxes, maybe licenses and fees, things like that. And so that's another part of the story here, is that it's the revenue side as well as the expenditure side.
I want to elevate something that you said in there of not expected to grow. Is there any part of this shortfall that is tied to federal funding, maybe that is tied to us being a blue city, maybe that is tied to Metro Surge? And I ask that more specifically to be like, is this a sort of thing we just have to weather for the moment? And once there's a new administration, is this going to just kind of solve itself and we just have to get by? Or is this representative of a larger, more endemic problem for the Minneapolis budget?
The answer is yes. To both.
Okay.
And I think the mayor presented his budget yesterday a little bit more in the line of, he said we've got a couple of years to get through where, maybe we're still experiencing like, the sharpest dip in the commercial real estate market, the kind of lag of challenges downtown. We need to make these adjustments and then our budget will improve, our outlook will improve. Okay. And I don't know exactly the impact of Metro Surge, but I do think generally the city has not had like a booming couple of years, really not since the pandemic. And so I think there's some sense, I think it's an open question, but a good one, of how much should we be making like permanent changes now to adjust to a reality of greater scarcity versus staying consistent in our investments and trusting that those investments will get us to a better place in the future. I think that's a really important question, and it's one that I'm thinking about a lot. For example, with regard to the park budget, so the mayor proposed that the park levy, which is a separate levy, rather than fulfill their request for a 5.6% increase in their levy, I think he proposed like 2.3, something like that. And so basically saying like, well, everyone's got to tighten their belts. And, my perspective on that is that the parks are one of the most identifiable, universally appreciated public amenities in the city, and that cutting their budget by $3 million doesn't save, when you spread that out across the entire city's tax base, it doesn't save us a ton of money, and it might actually really hamper their personnel investments, their park maintenance, and programs that they've built out that are serving youth and lower opportunity parts of the city, et cetera. And so, my perspective, and I think the platform that I ran on, is that our public investments create enormous shared value and create the foundation on which we build, a high quality of life, shared prosperity, and a strong economy. And so if we want to get to a better future, then we have to be mindful of protecting a lot of the investments that get us there. I think there's a lot of times throughout history in our country and in other countries where you initiate like a period of austerity to save money, to tighten your belt. But so then you're not investing in people who are on the margins, who need help. You're not investing in the schools or the parks or the things like that. And then that divestment creates further scarcity and actually prolongs the period of downturn. And so I think it kind of depends on your perspective. And I think either thing could be true. And I think a lot of it depends on the choices we make right now and in the next couple of years.
$409, which is the amount per year for owners of a median Minneapolis home valued at $351,400. That's based on an 11.3% increase to the property tax levy. To still make these numbers meet, Mayor Frey is proposing that huge increase in property tax, the most in 26 years, plus 100 job cuts for city employees and cuts to several city services and programs to make up the difference. We got a long time till the budget is finalized.
True.
Do you see any of these pieces changing? And
Absolutely.
What do you expect to be the biggest points of argument?
Yeah. So, I think this is a framework. This is a first proposal, and I haven't, I'm going to be a little bit measured in what I, prognosticate or what I suggest where I'm at with things, because I haven't spoken to all my council colleagues. I haven't spoken with the mayor since before the proposal. And that's all very important. But, certainly I think the size of the levy increase is going to be a major concern for a lot of people on both ends of the spectrum on the city council. And I think that, the amount going to police obviously is going to be controversial, with some being heavily in favor and some being, much more so opposed. I'm sure there's also other controversial changes that are happening in smaller areas of the budget. I was just started last night going through department by department, and frankly, I didn't get through all of it yet, but, we'll all be studying this proposal over the weeks to come, and then, coming up with thoughtful responses and questions and things like that. But I think a lot of it will change. I think a lot of those 100 cuts, a lot of them are sprinkled throughout different departments. There's 1 to 3 positions being cut in a lot of different departments. And so I'm sure a lot of people have different opinions on which of those are appropriate and which of those actually hurt more than you'd expect, and which of those were already unfilled, but whereas which are actually layoffs. So there's a lot of open questions there. But I do think, how much should we raise the property tax burden to fund MPD as currently constituted? That's obviously going to be the most controversial question. But then there's a lot of other areas where things aren't moving, where folks might disagree. There's certain departments that are, largely untouched, and maybe, some people feel like those are places where we should be looking at greater reductions. I mean, my broad perspective on the whole thing is that in one way, I really appreciate the mayor's approach here, because I think what he's saying is that the city government is worth funding, and it's worth strengthening, even during what's widely perceived as difficult times. And so in some sense, I'm like, I actually think this is kind of a good moment to increase the property tax levy more in line with our need and to make investments in the city, in the basic services that keep the city running. And so the fact that he's willing to stand up and defend an 11.3% levy increase, I want to give him kudos for that. I think my concern is that will city residents feel that this budget and that this substantial increase in their tax burden is getting them commensurate value?
Yeah.
And is it actually going to improve the quality of their life, the quality of their community? Is it going to even improve their public safety, which I would say is like the top build investment here? Or is it just spending more essentially for the status quo? And if that's the case, then I think that's a harder pill to swallow. So I think, to me, that's where I'm going to be thinking about the changes that are being made and asking, like, where are we actually, strengthening services that the people want and are calling for that we know will get us to a better place in the future? And where is there a lack of direction or a lack of vision for where we should be going?
So how do you make that case as a group of folks? You're in budgets all the time. You're thinking about money. I hadn't really ever thought about it in that terms of like, if I'm going to get charged 11.3% more, is my life going to be 11.3% better?
Right.
Is it going to be 15% better? Is it going to be 45% better?
Right.
Is it about my life getting better? Is it about our life getting better? How should, as people evaluate this and follow this story, because it's going to be changing and because there's so many constituent parts to it, how should people be evaluating that shocking number, that painful thing that's about to happen to them, and these very amorphous, spread out, who knows kind of where are we seeing the improvements? How are you all going to tell that story, and how should people be looking for that story?
I mean, I would love for people to think more and talk more and be more publicly vocal about the things where they feel they would make a difference. And I've started having more and more, participating in more and more community meetings and things like that where people are talking about that. I was with a group of business owners in the Longfellow neighborhood on Monday night, I think it was, and they're very concerned about the population of unsheltered folks in their area, both for the sake of those people and for their sake as business owners. Right. And just like they're really good, like South Minneapolis folks who understand the struggles of addiction, who understand the struggles of impoverishment, and they want to help those people, but they also, don't want those people defecating outside of their storefronts, and that's obviously something that no one wants to deal with. And so, what are the other examples of issues that people are experiencing in the city that they want rectified? And so one of the best things that the mayor's done is bringing 23 street ambassadors in-house, which I think is a great move. So he's retaining these ambassadors that we've hired, and he's actually saving $700,000 by cutting down on the contract costs. So that was I really want to applaud him for that. And I think it's a program that I've heard small businesses that people in community and that's bringing real value and helping, deal in a more peaceful way with some of the public safety concerns. So, those are the sorts of things where that is a tangible, visible value for the city. But I think it kind of behooves all of us to be vocal about what we would like to see invested in. But it's a difficult thing, to your question, because a lot of what the city does is regulatory and administrative, and those are not things that everyone interacts with.
You got to be ready for the difficult things if you sign up to be on the Minneapolis Board of Estimate and Taxation. Sounds a lot harder than printing money. Eric Harris Bernstein, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for the work you're doing in Minneapolis. And I appreciate getting all this information. And I bet we'll be talking to you again before this budget is actually finalized. But thanks for your service today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And check in anytime.
We really want to hear from you. What do you think about these budget increases? What do you think about the value you might get out of these property tax increases? Send us a text or leave us a voicemail on the CityCast Twin Cities hotline. That number is 612-217-0637. We love hearing from you, and we love to include your thoughts in an upcoming mailbag segment. There's more to discuss, but before we do that, we'll take a quick break. Hans, as they say, it's the stinking weekend, and I want to celebrate some wins around the Twin Cities. Can you kick us off with a big sort of Democratic win, in my opinion?
Yeah, as all Democratic wins are. We're going to take a deeply winding and confusing road to get there. You and I have covered together the Right to Repair initiative that is making its way to the St. Paul ballots on Election Day on November 3rd. So, really quick, that initiative, it lets tenants order repairs that they need done on rental properties after they send 14-day notice to their landlord and spend up to half of their monthly rent or $500, whichever one I think is more. So the team that was behind this initiative and is pushing this, they got a whole bunch of signatures, and they got enough signatures to see it on that ballot on November 3rd. But the St. Paul City Council came in and they said, based on advice from the city attorneys and discrepancies between state laws and city laws, it's going to make the policy unenforceable. And so we're going to vote it down. No, it's not going to happen. It's not going to go to ballot in November. So the city brings this to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, no, we're not going to see it. That appeal from the city council was denied. And so now it will be on the ballot. Whether it's passed or not, it's on there. Democratic. After all the twists and turns, we're back where we started of having this thing on the ballot November 3rd. Democracy in action. You know what? Actually, I love to see that. That is a win. Democracy in action.
100%. Another win for me is periodical in hand. I'm a man who still loves a magazine, and one of the best print magazines in the Twin Cities shuttered their doors in a pretty weird way in June. I don't know if you followed Lavender Magazine finishing, but Lavender Magazine was basically like, mission accomplished. Everything's cool for this community. And I think people were like, good. And then it turns out that although Lavender Magazine is done, another LGBTQ plus focused publication is going to be launching in October, and it's helmed by former Lavender editor Andy Lean. They got a staff of 5, and they're going to do some modernization things. Like they're going to have video, they're going to have online event calendars, and they are going to have a digital version of the magazine, but they are going to actually still have a print magazine. And this warms my heart because that's how I like to engage with magazines. And Barry Levitt, who is Q's vice president of sales and events, said, quote, there are people we found that are older who want nothing but digital, and there are people who are younger who want to hold something tangible in their hands. I'm an older person who wants to hold something tangible in my hands, and it's just a win that we can hold something like Q Magazine in our hands coming up in October. So congratulations to the 5-person team, who I bet are working their butts off right now to get this thing up and running.
I would normally agree that it's a win to hold something in your hand, except for the next thing that I'm happy about. I've been following this story for quite a while, and it's absolutely fascinating, and I feel like we've made some really good strides in ALPR tech. ALPR, of course, everyone knows, automated license plate readers. The most famous one you've probably heard is Flock, which is this company who's been around now a while and has spent the last few years going into contract with municipalities and police departments all around the country to say, hey, we will automatically tag license plates. We will read so you can follow any car that you want to at any point all over the city. You can figure out where they go. Now they want to add in the fact that they can do facial recognition, and they want to be able to say, oh, also we can tell you who's driving it. Well, Minnesota has been doing a lot of pullback from those. And all of the data and all of the mass surveillance that they represent. West St. Paul ended their Flock trial, which is awesome. Columbia Heights City Council, they voted in their contract. Woo woo. Most interestingly, Winona, Minnesota, down on the river, kind of like I heard about this first from national figures in social media. I was like, is that Winona? Is that our Winona? When 8 Flock cameras were stolen this summer, they put out a press release saying, you know what? We're good. We're not going to replace them. You've told us what you want. We will respect it. Duluth, they ended their contract like just a million high fives in the air for this. Like, we don't need these in our communities. So this is a step in the right direction.
And it feels like a turning of the tide, especially some of the data center stuff somehow connects with it for me as well. Where I just feel people are going like, Everybody's looking for the pause button on some of these new technologies, and I think that is wonderful. Stop button I was not happy that the Twin Cities hit was the stop button of Bauhaus Brewing.
Yeah.
Because Bauhaus Brewing is a significant brewery in Northeast Minneapolis. It has one of the biggest physical plants, one of the most beautiful breweries, in my opinion. And then they said in June, we're closing. With a lot of difficulties with running a brewery in the Twin Cities, period. A lot of difficulties with running a brewery that has THC in the Twin Cities, and a lot of difficulties with running any kind of business throughout Operation Metro Surge. And I was really worried that this thing was going to sit empty for a long time. Instead, in a matter of months, ABV Technology, which has actually worked with Bauhaus before on creating some of their NA products, stepped in, purchased Bauhaus, and they reopen again tomorrow. And frankly, I'm thankful that the brewery scene can stay strong in Northeast Minneapolis, and especially that a lot of the folks who did work at Bauhaus are back working there, and it's wonderful news for anybody who loves breweries.
Yes.
Twin Cities wins, Hans. Are you feeling slightly optimistic on this Friday?
And everybody's on vacation? Like, this is a win for us. This is great.
Today's CityCast neighbors get a bonus segment where we play a rousing edition of Hot Dish Hush. It's so rousing that I'm already holding a stopwatch. This is awesome stuff. If you want to be roused, then you got to become a member. You get this extra content. All you got to do is head to citycast.fm/Twin Cities and sign up. It's $10 a month, and members get ad-free listening, exclusive member events, and an extra newsletter from me every week. Again, that's membership.citycast.fm/Twin Cities. That's all for today here on CityCast Twin Cities. I'm your host, Sean McPherson. Eric Harris Bernstein, Hans Buetow, Anna Weigel, thanks for being here today. On Monday's episode, we're planning on talking to author Drew M. Ross about the historical and hydrological reasons why the Twin Cities never united to become a single city, and we'll discuss whether ShotSpotter technology is worth the cost for Minneapolis. Don't miss it. Our executive producer is Anna Weigel. Our creative producers are Adam Sage and Tiffany Bowie. Special thanks to Alyssa Castles and Will Fulton. Our senior account executive is Heather Hull. Post-production is by Jesse Wiza, and our host is me, Sean McPherson. Our theme music is by Carl Christensen. Our mailbag music is by Adam Sage. Our ad music is by Sven Lindvall and Sarah, the instrumentalist from Epidemic Sounds via Getty Images. You can get more news delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to the CityCast Twin Cities newsletter. If you enjoyed today's show, why not share this podcast with someone who loves to see a brewery reopen? We'll see you back here on Monday for more news from around the city.